The reason they like reading my stuff is that I've always got real life examples to prove what I'm saying.
There's a lot of good people that listen to this podcast.
Other than God and my family, deer hunting would be next in line on my list of priorities.
From the bottom of our hearts, it's just fantastic and awesome to have the support that you guys are getting.
People ask me about expandable broadheads and love swings.
Chasing Giants with Don Higgins and Terry Peer. Brought to you by Osseo Camo, nature's most lethal camouflage. Follow along as Don and Terry discuss the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Chasing Giants podcast with Don Higgins. I'm Terry Peer. It's episode 139, and we're sitting at the middle of October. Most people are talking about the October lull right now, Don, but we've actually both seen some new bucks show up on camera. Let's talk real quickly about that, and then we got some announcements to make, and going to kind of try to talk about how we've both had to have a change of plans this year.
Yeah, my trail cameras have blowed up this week. I got 12 cell cams, so I've got a pretty good handle on when deer are moving, when they're not, because if they're moving, those 12 cameras are lighting up my phone. And this week there were several days where the deer were going crazy. You would almost thought it was November, and we got a really strong cold front coming in tomorrow. Actually, the next 3 nights, our temperature is supposed to be below freezing, and that's just about unheard of for mid-October here. I've hunted the last 2 evenings and seen deer both times, but I think this week, I've just never seen a cold front that I can remember this cold, this early. Right. I'm going to go out, and I'm probably even going to hunt a morning or two, just because, I've never seen this before, and definitely don't want to miss an opportunity. So we'll get out there and see what happens.
Yeah, we've talked about hunting in October, and we've also talked about don't worry as much about the calendar as we're watching the weather. And the takeaways for this cold front, number one, for those areas that's been battling EHD, this is probably an answer to prayer for a lot of places, because it's going to move into here in Ohio. So I hope that we get a good freeze on the ground just to stop whatever momentum EHD's getting this year. But I think you're right. I think if people can navigate work and obligations, I think it's worth hunting. I know what you're saying about hunting October mornings this week, but I also know what stands those are, and they have foolproof access to where you don't have to worry about jumping anything like most spots do. So yeah, it'll be really interesting. I think it's supposed to drop really hard tomorrow here also.
Yeah, and I just can't remember it ever being this cold in mid-October. And I mean, I've seen it this cold at the end of October, like the last few days, getting around Halloween, and we can definitely, get a freeze. But 3 days in a row in mid-October, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, it could be one of those deals where this is our chance, because it could turn hot again real easy through early November and just be absolutely, horrible conditions. So like we always talk about, Dwayne Hopkins says read the weather, not the calendar, and I think the same goes for hunting. We have to be able to try to navigate these fronts as much as possible. Obviously, I don't think the majority of the does are going to be ready to be bred, but it might sure get the bucks a little bit froggy trying to look around.
That's what I'm thinking, and next weekend it's supposed to be back in the 70s here. So this cold front's going to last 2 or 3 days, but then it's warming right back up. So, don't have much to lose.
What's the area wind going to be around you? Is it going to be westerly winds or out of the north, or what is it up there?
Northwest.
Yeah, same as here. So,
yep.
What's the status of your all's ag crop getting out of the field? Has most of the beans been pulled in and they're working on corn, or since it's so dry, I would assume they're running a little bit early?
Yeah, over half the fields have been harvested around me, and with one more good week, we're not supposed to get any rain this week, even with this cold front. So one more good week, and there ain't going to be a whole lot left.
Right. All right. Well, a couple quick announcements, and I know, if I'm not mistaken, our friend Joe Miles, his episode of Whitetail Cribs, I believe, airs tonight. So I hope everybody checks that out on the Exodus YouTube channel. I'm sure Joe and his team will share it from his. What else were we going to mention? How's enrollment been for the Whitetail Academy?
Really good. Yeah, we just keep plugging away, and every day there's numerous new subscribers. So
Good.
that's good. That's going to allow us to invest more into it. The production cost of these videos, Steve, he dedicates a lot of time to some of these videos, especially with the graphics and things that he does. So the feedback that we've got from everyone that has subscribed has just been awesome. We have not had one negative comment yet. So everybody seems to be pleased, and people signing up every day.
Yeah, and we have a listener submitted question later tonight that's going to prove that we use all questions on the podcast. But somebody has some pretty pointed questions about the master class and Whitetail Academy, so we'll talk a little bit about that later. And we'll do a Lester's Feet segment later. But there is one thing that I wanted to ask everybody for some prayers on. A real close personal friend of Don and I's and Real World and Chasing Giants, Stephanie Bryson, her mother passed away this last week, and her funeral is tomorrow. So I know sometimes Stephanie listens, sometimes she doesn't, but she does all the embroidery work, or a good portion of it, for our company, and has been a good friend. She's actually an accountant. Remember when she bailed us out on the QuickBooks debacle back in the day when our QuickBooks wasn't working? Back many years ago. But say a prayer for her family. She's had a rough couple weeks taking care of her family as they've navigated the loss of her mother. All right. Well, let's take a quick break and play an Osseo spot, and then we're going to come back with a little bit of an update about how Don and I are kind of moving and adapting as the season goes on.
Osseo Gear introduces a premium line of bow hunting gear that is unmatched, pairing nature's finest camouflage with the best technological innovations. Osseo Gear brings whitetail bow hunters the gear they need to be the best at their craft. The unique camouflage mimics the intricate feather pattern of North America's greatest predatorial creatures. Designed for invisibility, built for comfort, and engineered for function. Visit OsseoGear.com. That's ASIO Gear.com to start shopping. Osseo Gear, prepare to be invisible.
All right, Don. Well, I find it interesting and humbling how many people talk about us sharing our faith on this podcast and how much they appreciate it. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that don't care to listen to a church service either, but they like the hunting stuff. So I was sitting in church this morning and I couldn't help think about what's happened to us personally in our hunting season the last couple weeks. And our senior minister preached a sermon on Ephesians 4. And we didn't talk a whole lot about this, but I think it's just fantastic feedback and guidance. People ask us for advice all the time about how we do things and how we navigate things that happen in the real world have to come from biblical principles. And I think that it's a good opportunity for us to put our faith where our mouth is, if for lack of a better term, but also kind of get a feel of where we stand with our hunting season goals, objectives, because some of them are a little bit different than where we started in August with dealing with neighbors and target bucks and access and everything. So just to take a quick break, I promise this isn't going to be a sermon for everybody, but I'm going to share a quick scripture from Ephesians chapter 4. And this passage of scripture was written from Paul as he was in prison in Rome, and he was writing it back to the churches, and it was about the unity and maturity in the body of Christ. And it starts in verse 1 saying, "As a prisoner for the Lord, then I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you have received. Be completely humble and gentle, be patient, bearing with one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace." Now, Don, the first thing that comes to my mind on this is, coming after getting attacked publicly on a podcast, and it got so out of hand that we had to kind of just make a statement that said, yeah, we're moving on, so be it. It's really hard to stay humble and not fight back and keep doing what you're doing. But that principle really comes to surface in that scripture, doesn't it?
Yeah, Terry, I don't want to get into too many details, but the scripture that has come to my mind a lot in the last 3 weeks is "Vengeance is mine," saith the Lord. I really had to bite my tongue. I really had to hold myself back on multiple situations, and I think the first week of season, we talked about the podcast we did on opening weekend. I said that I had to deal with 4 different situations that week, 4 different totally unrelated situations, all negative, and all had to do with people. People are the biggest problem in the world. It's hunting big deer would be a whole lot easier if it wasn't for the challenges thrown up by other people. And they've got the right to chase the same deer we do. That's not where I'm coming or going with this. And if someone is chasing a buck that I'm chasing and they're successful, well, good for them. I'll shake their hand. If I have shed antlers from that buck, I'll give them to them and expect nothing in return. I'll share any trail camera photos and things like that. But sometimes, as much as we always want to do the right thing, sometimes the goodness in our heart gets tested. And
Yep.
I've had multiple situations already this season where I've been tested, and so far I've managed to keep my pie hole shut on social media.
Well, I think that this passage of scripture is kind of interesting because Paul's writing as a prisoner. Basically, he's in jail in Rome, and he starts the passage of scripture saying, "As a prisoner for the Lord." He's not starting it as a letter to the churches back home saying, "I'm a prisoner in Rome." He's still separating what his purpose is. So I think the takeaway for us hunters right now is we're getting ready to move into the key part of our season, what we've worked so hard for, and this stuff where people are going against each other and trying to sabotage each other, or maybe we're dealing with a neighbor, maybe we're dealing with trespassers, other hunters. Maybe our target buck got shot. In my case, it broke his antler already. We have to stay focused as not saying, "Hey, I'm a prisoner of this place in Rome. What's the greater purpose?" And I'm a land manager. I'm a hunter. All of those things we talked about with discipline that we started at the beginning of the year with goals, that's still the priority, no matter what all these factors around us are. It's real easy coming into October 16th, getting ready. We're 2-3 weeks away from the rut to say, "Oh, my target buck's not here for some reason. I'm going to cave and change my goal."
Yeah. Another scripture that comes to me a lot here recently is pray for your enemies. It's like dumping hot coals on their head.
Yeah.
And I've tried to overlook other people's actions, and I remind myself that when I was younger, I did a lot of stupid things. I still do, actually, but when I was younger, I did some of the things that are done to me today, and so I've tried to be more forgiving, and at the same time, I realize that every time life and faith both are a series of peaks and valleys. You're either down in the valley or you're up on the mountaintop, it seems. And every time you get down in the valley, there's better days ahead. You're going to be back up on top again. And even in your darkest hour, if you're laying on your deathbed, you're down in the valley, but there's light at the end of that tunnel. You're going to be on the mountain soon.
Yeah, I keep thinking of other hunters right now. In Kentucky, there's been some giants killed. Iowa, there's been some giants killed. I know of 4 or 5 other people that's been dealing with trespassers and spotlighting. that I talk to on social media. I just think that we have to keep perspective. Both of us have had to adapt our plan now and then. My year is a perfect example this year with a target buck that I was all over the entire early season and never quite got a shot. Had one shot opportunity, but messed up. And now he's got a broken antler and probably going to be 10, 11 inches smaller. And I've had to make the decision to pass him now. And that's my decision. I mean, I wouldn't blame other people for shooting him, but you have to adapt and you have to go in the direction that's still maintaining the integrity of what your property is going to do. And, I guess the misconception people have is that we don't have struggles ourselves. We got neighbors, we got issues with people setting our property lines. We got issues with, target bucks going and disappearing on us. But, the whole thing that kind of brought this to my head is, we got that other podcast that got so much buzz, and it's like at the end of the day, we're going to use this podcast to try to encourage people for the good, to try to use scripture like this to say navigate your hunting season and your issues that you have. Like Paul was talking to the church. And as everybody else is trying to create division, Paul reminds us in verse 3, make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. And it's hard to swallow our pride sometimes and pray for the people. But at the end of the day, they need the Lord. And if they need the Lord, they need the Lord. And if they get that and me not get a deer, I'm perfectly content with that.
Yeah, in some ways, chasing giants, in other words, chasing giant bucks, is very similar to our walk of faith. You got to keep your eye on the prize, and it's not going to be smooth sailing every day.
Yep.
There's going to be those ups and downs, and you just got to stay focused, on the end. And we talk about if you compromise your goal, you really never had a goal, you just had a dream. And with any believer, the goal is to get to heaven, and you just got to stay focused on that. And with a deer hunter, your goal is chasing giant bucks and killing giant bucks, and it's not going to be easy. There's going to be challenges along the way, and you just got to stay focused.
All right. So if you could lay out what your anticipation and thought process of how this year you wanted it to go versus how it is right now, how much has it deviated? And we'll both answer this question, but I'll let you go first. And then part of this answer, I want us to talk a little bit about your recent trip out to Iowa, because you drew a tag last year, but you don't have a tag this year. And it's just like you said, eye on the prize. We're starting to put pieces together for down the road where most people would not have put that time, effort, and energy into it.
Well, I've also had some positive things happen since season opened. I bought the new property and getting it set up, and there's some other things I'm really not ready to talk about yet, but there's some positive things happening too. But those positive things are like down the road. This immediate season, last year I did not shoot a deer, period. And I don't recall ever in my life going 2 seasons and not shooting a buck, 2 seasons back to back. And the challenge for me right now is that I know where there's multiple bucks that are over 170 inches and a couple over 180 inches that I feel I could kill them if I wanted to. And, but I really want to give them one more year. And the only reason I would not give them one more year is because they live in areas with plenty of pressure, and the odds of them getting killed by somebody are really good. So the struggle for me right at the moment is these bucks that are borderline. They're really good as they are, but they're only 4 or 5 years old, and I know that they could still have another big antler jump in them. Smokey, the buck I shot in 17. Actually, it was 5 years ago yesterday. He grew 20 inches between 5 and 6 years old. And if one of these other bucks did the same, well, I could have one of them knocking on 200 inches. So I'm sitting here this season thinking to myself, is this going to be the first time in my life that I go back-to-back years and not shoot a buck? Or do I shoot one of these bucks hoping that the other ones live? Or what am I actually going to do? Or and I continue to look for more. I mean, my search for the next giant never ends. So I'm still doing that. And I'm just kind of up in the air at the moment.
Well, it's to phrase it differently, are you going to change what you want to do based on the actions of others around you? And it's a very big dilemma. Am I going to let others affect my decisions or ride it out? And when we're talking about world-class whitetails, unfortunately, big bucks bring out the worst in people. I wish the hunting industry would bring out the good in people, but when it comes to big bucks, big bucks bring out the worst in people. And I'm to the point in my life, Don. I've never shot a net booner. I've shot bucks that gross over it, but there's no buck at this point in my life. And maybe it's just me getting older and understanding things a little bit better. There's not one single buck in my life or out there that is worth jeopardizing or ruining a relationship with at this point. It's just not worth it to me. And unfortunately, it is to people.
And unfortunately, it probably is to some of our friends. Yep. That, the respect that we show others is not always shown back to us. And that's the struggle that I'm having this year, is that on multiple occasions, other deer hunters have shown me a level of disrespect that I never would have shown them.
Well, but I think we have to just break this segment up. It's not about a church service. It's about what we have to go through in our minds, the same as everybody else. Everybody asks us for hunting advice all the time. We're sitting here in the middle of October, getting ready for the rut, prime time, and we're dealing with the same types of frustrations, decisions, anxiety, disappointment that every other person is. And it's just like verse 2 says, stay humble, gentle, be patient. I think patient is the key word, right, Don? Patient is a huge part of what we're trying to do, playing the long game, and bearing with one another in love. So you're not going to get treated back that way, but if we're running our hunting season like Paul gave advice to the early church, I think Ephesians chapter 4 is great advice for you. So people have asked about the bucket at home that I wanted to shoot. He is going to get a free pass this year. They may very well get shot. My plan, I bounced some ideas off of you. We got 4 bucks over 5 years old on the property. I don't care what I shoot them with. I took a muzzleloader out tonight. I'm going to shoot one of those older bucks, and then hopefully my kids get a crack at the other ones. And we're going to try to get some of those older bucks of older age structure off. So hopefully he's back next year. And I can tell you one thing, it's always a learning process, right? I've obviously made this farm to where I can get in and out without pressure, but I need to work on some shot scenarios to where these bucks are just a little bit closer. So we're going to be doing a lot of projects in the off season to get them from that 50-yard mark into inside 25. So with that, go ahead.
You talk about the long game, Terry. And the long game, people need to realize it is not the season. We're not talking about the entire hunting season. The long game includes multiple seasons. So you cannot kill a buck during one season and really be setting yourself up for success the following season. So the long game is not just a season. It's a lot longer than that. And that's what people need to realize. And what we preach here is, help yourself down the road.
Yeah, we've used the analogy back a long time ago on the podcast, playing for national championships back before college basketball was ruined by the one and dones and the paying athletes and all this. Back in the day when you had true college basketball, you would get these recruiting classes that would build up, and they got to be upperclassmen and went to play for a national championship, and you tried to create a feeder system to be competitive, but the likelihood of you winning back to back to back to years was pretty small. But I think if every hunter that wanted to manage and truly chase giants was given with an opportunity to say, you don't kill a deer for 1 or 2 years, but you have a shot on the 3rd year for a world-class whitetail, I would hope that there would be a lot of people to take that deal every year. And, you get to the elite level bucks that you're hunting, not that necessarily I'm hunting. I mean, you're on way the other end of the bell curve from me. You have to play that way because there's just not a 200 incher behind every tree in any state.
Well, you've got more faith in the hunting community than I do, because I just don't see people playing the long game. They've got to shoot something every year, and that's their right. I'm not complaining, but what I'm saying is they've got that dream, but they don't have it in their heart to do what it takes to reach that dream.
Yeah. What I meant to say is I would hope they would. I didn't say they would. I would hope they would. So, but anyway, all right, let's take a quick break, and we'll come back with our first question of the night. All right, Don, I got question number 1 up on the screen for you to read.
This one comes from David Vaith from St. Genevieve, Missouri. It says, "Hi, Don. Huge fan of the show. Keep it up. So getting right into it, I hunt big woods in Missouri, and I was wondering if you had any advice for anyone like me for patterning big bucks and picking apart these big woods and trying to find the where and where not to hunt." Well, David, your timing is absolutely perfect, because this past week, Steve Shields and I was in the woods in a big wood setting addressing this very question. And we filmed an exact spot that I've hunted before in a big wood setting. It was actually even on public ground, a place I've hunted multiple years on public land, big woods. And it all comes down to terrain. And you got to have terrain features that are pinching that deer traffic down, because a buck is going to use his nose for every inch that he possibly can. But there's going to be situations where terrain is going to force him to give up part of that wind. Now, he's not going to just waltz through with the wind at his back, but instead of having the perfect wind, it's just going to be just off just enough that he's going to take a chance and slip through. And it's really hard to explain just with audio. And that's why Steve and I went to the exact location. Steve filmed me walking in, the route that I take to get to this particular stand, how I access the stand, the wind direction. We're going to show it from an aerial. I get this question a lot, and in fact, we spent almost an entire day on this one video project. So be looking for that on the Whitetail Master Academy.
All right. Well, before our second question, we're going to take a quick break, and I have Don Bailey on to give a quick heads up. It's a very short segment tonight about 2 upcoming properties for 2 small tracts that are going to be up for online auction at buyafarm.com.
Buyafarm.com is your source for farm, recreational properties, rural homes, and more. Now, here is Don Higgins with this week's featured property.
Welcome to this segment of the Buyafarm.com Property of the Week with Don Bailey. Don, we're back tonight, but this time to talk about maybe a smaller tract for people who are looking for recreational or hunting property but don't have the means for a large one. We actually have 2 different ones tonight.
Yes, Terry. We have one 10-acre tract located in Crawford County. It's about 46 miles from Terre Haute, basically south of Martinsville, Illinois. Mm-hmm. It's a good-looking tract, has a Willow Creek run through it. Looks like some backwater, or when the creek gets out, the water can get on some of it, but for the most of it, it looks like a great tract. It sets not exactly, but it sets in the middle of a lot of acres of timber.
Okay.
Which, for a deer hunter, this 10 acres is going to hunt like a lot larger track.
Sure. Okay. And you said this is in Crawford County, and this one is an online auction. When is the start date and close date for these?
Yeah, it opens November the 1st, and the bidding closes at November the 15th at 8 p.m.
Okay.
Central Illinois time.
So this is 10 acres with a creek, but in the middle of big woods all the way around it. But all woods though, no buildings or anything on that. It's just a true clean sheet of paper for somebody.
Yes. The second track I wanted to talk about, Terry, is in Hamilton County, roughly 16 miles southeast of Benton, Illinois, and Interstate 57.
Okay.
To kind of give people an idea. It's also a 10-acre tract, and it is surrounded by more timber than the first one.
Okay.
There's literally hundreds and hundreds of acres that this doesn't set in the middle of, but it sets continuous to.
Mm-hmm.
Bidding starts on it November the 3rd, and bidding closes November the 17th on our online auction.
Okay. So when we're looking at properties like this that are smaller tracts, I still think that there's going to be questions for people that want to do it. The thing that I like is we have a couple weeks before the auction starts on either one of these properties. So are they available to go and tour or inspect with an appointment?
Sure. Yep. Just contact me, Don Bailey. My direct phone number is 618-919-1031, or drop me an email at dbailey@biofarm.com. Basically, we can set up anything to look at them.
Okay. So I like the fact that we try to, use the podcast to highlight different types of properties. So these are going to be all woods, smaller tracts, a different price point, obviously, for everyone, because everyone has different needs and different budgets. So if you want to go to biofarm.com, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's Crawford County and Hamilton County. Is that right?
That's correct.
All right. And we have a couple weeks before they open. I believe the Crawford County opens on November 1st. The Hamilton County opens on November 3rd, and they run about a week and a half, 2 weeks. So give Don Bailey a call. Say your number for everyone one more time. And again, we appreciate your time and partnership with the podcast.
Yes, my direct line is 618-919-1031. Thank you ever so much, Terry.
Thank you.
All right, Don, I'm going to share question number 2 for you.
Okay, next question comes from Lance Fisher from Kirbyville, Missouri. He says, Don and Terry, between the podcast, masterclass, and now the Master Academy, I have learned so much from the both of you, not only about deer, but about life, setting the example for others, and standing up for what is right, even when unpopular. Don has started multiple businesses throughout his life. With that said, my question today is a bit off topic. Can you provide any wisdom or suggestions for any of us that are just starting or looking to start a business and be successful? Thanks for all you do. God bless. A couple pieces of advice, Lance. Actually, I got multiple things to say here. First of all, your business has to be something that you're passionate about. Let me give you an example. If I was to go in restaurants that are very profitable, but if I was to go into the restaurant business, I would be a total failure, because cooking and dealing with the public like that and all that goes with running a restaurant, that's just not me. I have no passion for it, and I'd be miserable every day I was there doing it. You got to find something you're passionate about. That's my first advice. Another bit of advice is that you got to do something where you set the price. In other words, in the past I've tried, raising livestock, and it can be profitable, but your profit margins are very minimal because when you go to sell your livestock, someone else is setting the price. They're telling you what they're going to give you for your commodity that you've invested in. So whatever you're going to do, whether it's a service or you're producing either a goods or a service, whatever it is, it needs to be something that you set the price. So you got to set it, so you're making a good profit. Another piece of advice is I would strongly encourage you to avoid partnerships that are 50-50. There's got to be someone in charge. 50-50 partnerships are ships that someone told me one time the only ship that'll never sail is a partnership. Well, I think there's good partnerships. I'm in one right now and have been for the last few years, but a 50-50 partnership is just a recipe for an impasse. At some point, there's going to be an impasse. So don't ever start a business with someone 50-50. There's got to be a majority owner somewhere along the way. Another bit of advice on starting a business, there's 3 things that people will spend ridiculous amounts of money on and never bat an eye. One is their kids, the second is their pets, and the third is their hobbies. And you could try to. People go to the grocery store and they'll complain about the price of food, and then they'll turn around on the way home and they'll stop and they'll buy purified water for their stinking dog. They'll pets, children, and hobbies. They will spend ridiculous amounts of money. And if you can start a business that addresses one of those 3 things, you can operate at a good profit. So Terry is, to be honest, Terry is much, much better at business than I am. That's a reason that he's a huge reason why Real World has been so successful. And I lean on him heavily for business advice all the time. So I'm sure Terry has a lot to say on this question.
I think your viewpoint on everything is spot on. Your goods or your service that you're providing has to be a gap in the market. If you're trying to do something that's already saturated or you're following, it's going to be very tough to not turn it to a commodity, which basically you have to buy the business for someone to move over to your product or your service. So you don't want anything that you're investing into, getting into, that's already commoditized. So it might be as simple as someone in your area doesn't have a piece of equipment like a dozer or a track hoe, but construction is up. You start a business and run heavy equipment, expand your business. Austin, our friend Austin Razor, is a perfect example of that. There was a gap in his area. It might be a product that's in the hunting industry or in somewhere else, but if you develop, you got to have that secret sauce. If you develop that secret sauce, you got to go in and get it, because as soon as you're successful in it, everyone else is going to flood to you and try to take that away and commoditize it. So you have to also continue to evolve and invest, and you can't just sit back and unless it's just a quick sell and buy out. We look at the history of Real World, and people don't know this, and you'll have to tell me if you want this deleted or not, but you started this company and have had different partners over the years in it, but no one ever really took out a bank note as an investment to really do it. We kept putting money back into the company every year to grow it and develop the product line, and it would have been really easy for us at some point to stay, okay, we're going to go hire some famous person to promote it and take out a little bit of a loan. And it was just never the right thing for us. And I think we tried to grow organically, and and it was a slower rate of growth, but it was a lot less risk, if that makes sense to those people who are in business. So you have to decide whether you want to go in with big risk and borrow money, or go slower and risk others coming in behind you. And that really is going to depend on how much your competition is behind you. But the third thing I will say is surround yourself with quality people that you trust, that are always going to want to make the right decisions, not just for profit or product or market share, but also to find a way to make that business, that product, a benefit to others. And I think God's going to glorify whatever your decision and whatever your approach is, if you're whatever you're doing is for the glory of His kingdom. And I think when we kind of reevaluated everything in our portfolios that we work on together, and said we're not going to make this about us, and commit to it. We always kind of said it, but there was a key point when we really made it happen. And it's sad that it took a young kid like Wes Delks to kind of put some of that perspective back in our hearts. But I think God's always going to glorify those people who step out on a limb and try to serve Him through their everyday life.
Yeah, a couple more comments I'll add. Another thing that I would suggest, and it's worked for me fantastic, is diversify your business. If you buy a piece of heavy equipment, for example, let's just say you buy a dump truck and a skid loader, and one of the things you do is haul gravel and spread it on people's driveways. Well, don't just do that. You can buy 100 different attachments for that skid loader and do all sorts of different things. But the more you can diversify your business and then add new pieces of equipment, as Terry mentioned, the more you can diversify your business, the stronger it's going to be. And my final comment has to do with business partners that I've had over the years. You know, I don't want this to sound like sour grapes, but every single partner that I've had has had strengths and weaknesses, as have I. So, just because a situation didn't work out or doesn't work out doesn't mean that this person's the fault of the other. Everybody has their strengths and weaknesses. And the one thing that I've learned over the years of being in business, and again, that's business is not my strength by any means, but you need to let the people that you're working with play to their strengths. Don't micromanage them. Turn them loose and let them run with their strengths, and you'll get a lot farther than if you try to micromanage everybody and every minute that they spend working for you.
Yeah, it's an interesting dialogue. I wish and we talk about people trying to get into consulting, or Don Bailey's talked about people trying to get into real estate. And there's nothing wrong, absolutely, there's nothing wrong with chasing your dreams and doing it. But I think you have to uphold some integrity about what your skill sets are. Surround yourself by the right people. Don't and maybe even goes back to some of the conversations we had last week. If you at any time ever are bashing someone else to promote yourself, so in order to make yourself look better, you have to tear down somebody else. Going about it all wrong. I mean, we're guilty of probably being a little bit too over defensive sometimes when people attack us. We know that we struggle with that daily, but to just tear down somebody else for self promotion is quite selfish and probably not a good pathway for you to be starting out. So. All right, so let's. You got anything else for that one, or can we move on?
Let's move on.
Okay, question number 3.
Okay, this one comes from David Smalley from Claremore, Oklahoma. He says, "Hello, Don and Terry. My question is about air currents around ag fields." I think is what that's supposed to say. "I have always hunted ridges and oak flat in my home state. I am currently hunting Kansas, and even though every weather app shows a south-southwest wind, inevitably I have air currents coming in from the northeast while checking it with milkweed. I am sitting in a tree line on the edge of a soybean field I'm familiar with, thermals and such, but this seems confusing to me. Thanks for sharing your faith and knowledge with all of us. God bless, David." Well, David, learning to play the wind is a never ending process. And part of that process is learning how the air currents move at a specific stand location. And, I learned this the hard way years ago in situations very similar to what you described, where, say the wind was out of the west coming across open ag country, and then you're on the edge of a woods, or a tree line, and that wind hits that tree line, and then it goes down and eddies basically and swirls right back up. So it goes down, then it goes the opposite direction of what you think it is, and it swirls right back up. And there's really no answer other than you got to learn how the wind reacts in every stand location that you've got. And sometimes it takes hunting it wrong and figuring out that, hey, I thought I needed a southwest wind for this stand, but really what I need is, a northwest wind or whatever. So you just you're going to have to fine tune, each stand location, and you got to do that with firsthand experience. There's no way possible for me or anyone else to tell you what to do, but just take note of the wind direction that you need for each stand until you get it right.
Do you have to be willing to back out if it's wrong when you get there?
I've done it more than once. I can't tell you how many times I've climbed up and in less than 15 minutes I'm back out because I realized once I got there it wasn't right. And that's the right thing to do. I know a lot of people won't be disciplined enough to do that, but if they don't, they're just hurting their chances. And even me climbing in for 15 minutes is not a good thing whatsoever. You've just stunk up the area, but you get out as quick as you can.
Yep. All right. Well, we're going to take a quick break and talk about Lester's Feet. Our friends at Matthews forfeit their sponsorship segment of the podcast so that we can highlight some of the things going on with the nonprofit foundation that is governed by a board of directors to help families with kids with life-altering illnesses. So this week, I just want to ask for some prayers for a local family and good friend of our family, the Peers. Have her name is Allie Abney. Her husband is Alan. They just got married, but the board actually reviewed this case, and Allie has been a softball coach and mentor for young girls in our community for several years. And her husband got pregnant with their first child, but the child has quite a bit of issues. And this coming week, they're going to actually have the scheduled C-section at Children's Hospital, and immediately after birth, the baby is going straight into surgery. So they're going to be in NICU for an extended period of time. So thanks to the donors of Lester's Feet, they're both able to not have to worry about their job on FMLA to not only let Allie recover, but also focus on the child that's going to be going under some surgery. So if you guys could keep in your prayers Alan and Allie Abney from Kentucky. Alan just shot a really good buck in September here in Kentucky with archery equipment. So he's a good deer hunter, and they're really good people that have lived their entire life trying to give back to the community, and we just want to keep them in our prayers. We had a big week this week, Dawn. We wrote a lot of checks to families for everything from some more speech devices for autistic nonverbal kids to even some prosthetic devices like one of the little helmets that the kids have to wear when they have seizures. It just seems like we keep continuing to get so many leads from our listeners, which makes this thing really cool that the listeners of this podcast are helping us connect to these families, but so many different struggles that these families are going through. And you can be assured that all of the money that you've donated is going straight back to them by paying those bills directly. So thanks to everybody who's supported us. Thanks to Matthews for their support. And, we've had a couple people kind of say some snarky things about our sponsors lately. The real reason these sponsors are on this podcast is they step up too. They're the ones that really make this thing happen for us and have grown this foundation as big as what they are. So want to say thank you to all of them as well. Question number 4.
Okay, this question comes from James Market from Jefferson City, Missouri. He says, I can't seem to figure out how your master class is different than what I was taught on how to hunt deer as a kid. Nothing you say is really that earth-shattering. what is tough though is how you manage. What is though is how you manage your farm with fruit trees and nut trees for added nutrition. So what has the bigger impact? How you hunt compared to what you provided to attract and keep deer? Oh, well, James, your question almost got thrown to the dumpster, but you know what? I'll take the tough questions. Put me on the spot. Um, I can tell you that the fruit and nut trees on my farm are not the difference maker. Um, you almost sound like a guy that's looking for that magic bullet, that secret trick that those guys that kill big bucks know. And if they would just tell you, you would start shooting them too. And James, there is no big secret. I say that in my master class. It's one of the first things I say every morning in the master class. But there's some things that you got to do, some sound hunting practices that you got to do. And I preach a lot of them here. And if you've already heard them as a kid, then you've got a pretty darn good teacher, and you probably got a wall full of giants, and you don't even need to be writing to chasing giants, because you should have your own wall full of giants if you listened to this advice and heeded it over the years. But I'll let Terry run with it now.
I don't have really anything to say. I mean, if he got taught everything as a kid, he's far ahead of everybody else. I had great hunting mentors, but I still don't know it all today. You surround yourself from people that you can learn from. If you don't want to come to a master class, don't come to a master class. It's simple as that. But I'm not sure I really understand the question about the fruit trees and everything. But what has the bigger hunting impact? How you hunt or what you provide? I don't know if there's a cop-out answer that says both, but if I had the choice to pick one or the other, this part of my career, it'd be how I hunt, not what I do.
I knew where you was going.
At this part of my career, but I think that everything you do has a positive impact if done right, but so much can have a negative impact. For instance, you planting any product out there for the deer to eat can have a positive impact. You hunt it wrong, it's gonna outweigh any positive that you ever done. So, what has the bigger impact? How you hunt. But
absolutely,
I want the best of everything, so I'm gonna do how I hunt and what I do to the property to manipulate it to keep, attract, and grow the best bucks that I can.
Well, James also might be one of these guys, and I'm just kind of reading between the lines here, that thinks that the reason that I'm killing good deer is because I've got a special property and I provided something on that property. But James, the truth of the matter is my top 7 bucks come from 6 different properties, and only one of those properties even had a food plot on it, and that's my own. The others were not even leased properties. All the other properties were just knocking on doors for permission. There wasn't a single tree hinge cut. There was no habitat work done whatsoever. And yet I killed those bucks. So it's not what I provided. It's how I went about hunting them. Now, if you are able to manipulate your property and provide, things that your neighbors don't, well, that just sets you further apart and increases your odds. But it all comes down to how you hunt.
Yep. And if that's not what James was meaning by the question, that's just a lesson for everybody. We have to read between the lines based on what 3 sentences are sent, and be a little bit more detail oriented with your question if you wanted something different out of that. So we have to assume what you're trying to ask with having vague questions like that. So I think we got time for one more question. If you're up to it, you think you can get one more in?
Oh, I can get one more in.
All right.
So this one comes from Scott Heckerman from Dickinson, North Dakota. He says, I really enjoy listening to your podcast, and I've learned a lot from your information. My question pertains to rattling and grunt tubes. I am not educated enough on when to use and when not to use. Are there any clear times when to use and when not? I have been tree stand hunting a property, and I think I have scared off a couple of bucks when I rattled. There is one buck that I have seen twice, and both times I rattled, he either ran off or laid flat to the ground right when he heard me. Thank you for all the great help your team does for everyone. God bless, Scott. Scott, there's only one time to try to call it a buck, and that's if you see a target buck that is moving away from you and is not going to give you a shot and you have nothing to lose. That's the only time to call. Just as you mentioned, the twice that you've seen deer react, they both times they had a negative reaction to your calling. I'm telling you, for every mature buck that you call in, you're going to spook 20. And that's not an exaggeration. It may be even higher than that. By the time a buck reaches maturity, he knows the game. He's heard guys with their grunt calls playing the Star Spangled Banner, just like the guy that Terry was hunting next to a couple years ago here in Illinois. A mature buck, he's heard them. He's heard every brand. He can probably tell you what brand of grunt call you're using when you blow on it. He knows a real buck fight from some clown banging antlers against each other. The only time to call is when you see a target buck, not a buck, a target buck, when you want to shoot and he's moving away from you instead of towards you and you've got nothing to lose. That's the only time to call.
Yeah, I got some friends that are very good at it, but what they do, sorry, I just had a visitor. My dog just came down. Everybody want to see Rizzo? Here. What's up, buddy? Look here. He came down, wanted petting in the middle of it. What you said earlier about people dropping money on pets is completely accurate. But what I have a couple friends that are really, really good at rattling and calling, meaning their success has been high when they've done it. None of them, I think, are doing it blind just to try to create action because they're bored. And they're all able to do it in a way that they're watching the deer respond to it. So there's a visual between the person and the buck. They start out very light and increase when they can read the mannerisms of the buck and then adjust accordingly. Now, how they got to that point probably was not watching a YouTube video from a company who sells a grunt call or fake rattling antlers. It was probably just trial and error. But I would tend to be much more conservative than liberal when it comes to vocalizing anything in the woods. Now, you get down into South Texas, I hear stories that you rub two sticks together and the bucks come running. I can't speak to that specifically, but what I can tell you is the people that I've seen that have been successful with it, there's always a visual, and they build up as they're watching the deer react to it versus basically honking the horn on their car and alerting the deer where you're at.
And I will still bet that there's going to be people that totally disagree with my answer, and they're going to say, well, I rattled in this giant or that one, or I've rattled in bucks every season. Well, that may be. I'm not saying that you don't, but I still say that for every buck that you rattle or call in, you're going to spook 20 others and never even know it. You don't even know it happened. Yep. You might as well be blowing a trombone up there in your stand and saying, here I am, don't come this way.
That's like the people that say they've never been winded. Have you ever heard those people say that I've never been winded? Well, guarantee you've been winded. So
you just don't know it.
All right, so cold front coming in this week. Let's talk again a little bit about that. You're going to be in a tree. I'm going to be in a tree as much as possible. What else is on the docket for this week? You've planted trees on the new property. You've been to Iowa to put your cameras in to soak. Have all of your cameras been moved to rut spots, or are you still moving cameras around?
Most the ones I've got out are all in rut spots. I bought a bunch of new cameras this year just to have. Usually, every camera I've got is in the woods, and I like to have a couple extras on hand just for when you run into that spot where it needs a camera. You don't have to go grab one somewhere else and move it. So I've got some cameras on hand that I'd like to get a couple more out. You mentioned I planted trees on the new property this week. I got another load of trees I got to go get at Gingrich Tree Farm this week, and then one more day on that new property, and I'm done for the fall. And then next spring I got some work to do there, but I'm about ready to start hitting it hard in the woods. Steve Shields is coming back probably either the end of this week or the first of the next week. We're waiting on the fall colors to be at their peak to get some good video footage and photographs and stuff. But that's kind of my next week to 10 days.
Yep. I tell you, one project that I have to get done. I'm not going to take vacation this week, but try to leave work a little bit early to hunt the cold evenings. You're going to laugh at this, Don, but I am the most unorganized right now with all of my hunting gear than I have ever been. And you know how I hate to be unorganized with anything. My room down here is an absolute disaster. There's 5 SKB cases laying around. There's camo everywhere. I am an absolute disaster right now. I was looking for a bow hanger the other day, of all things, and I know I bought like 15 of them on Amazon not too long ago and can't find one of them. So you're going to laugh at that, but this is the most unorganized I've ever been leading up to or in the middle of hunting season, and that's my goal this week is here in just a little bit. I'm going to be spending a lot of time in Illinois. I need all my stuff together where I know where it's at.
Well, the one word I would never use to describe Terry Peer is unorganized. I've never seen him unorganized. Now, me, yeah, I'm unorganized, but Terry, he's got everything in order.
It's not, and I'm too embarrassed to even turn the camera around in the room right now, but it's pretty much a debacle down here. So that's my goal for this week, and be ready to hit it hard. I got 2 more really special weekends with my kids. Regionals and then state is the next 2 weekends. My junior son Jonathan just got featured. They put the ending of their marching band competition show together. I put a picture of him. I'd never heard him play this, but he gets up on this like stage thing in the middle of the football field and starts just wailing on this instrument. And I'm like, I didn't even know he could play that instrument, much less play it like it did. So the only thing that I could think of that the rest of the afternoon is seeing the joy of my kid. How could I ever walk away and put my hunting desires, wants, and goals ahead of supporting my kids? So for the next 2 weeks, that's a pretty small sacrifice. I'm going to be supporting them and traveling around with them for regionals and state. Then I have the month of November to play.
Awesome.
So,
yeah, you got your priorities in order, and that's what we encourage all the listeners to. Chasing big deer, it's got its place, but make sure it's not at the top.
Yeah. All right, folks. Well, we appreciate your help. We appreciate the support. Again, don't want to sound preachy, but go back and read Ephesians chapter 4. There's a lot of good advice that we need to live our life and not only deer season, but other aspects of my life that can be taken from Paul when he was in prison. So hope everybody has a great week.
God bless everyone. Have a great week.
Chasing Giants has been brought to you by Osseo Camo, Via Farm Real Estate Company, 360 Hunting Blinds, Victory Chevrolet, Real World Wildlife Products, Matthews Archery, Novix Tree Stands, Gingrich Tree Farm, WildlifeFarming.com, Quiet Cat, and Vortex Optics. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode of Chasing Giants.